Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on this somber evening of Yom HaShoah. We, as we know, must never forget the past. We are taking part this year again in the Yellow Candle Project. The project aims to distribute yellow remembrance candles to as many individuals in the community as possible. Alongside each candle, a card with the name, age, date, and place of death of someone who perished in the Holocaust is attached. If you would, please share your images of your lit candles on Edgware United's Facebook this evening, thereby creating a collective communal memorial. We've participated in the Yellow Candle Project for, I believe this is our 4th year, and it's extremely meaningful. One of the 6 million who perished at the hands of the Nazis, 1.5 million were children. Many of these children were part of families wiped out, and as a consequence, have never had Kaddish said for them, nor had a yahrzeit candle lit for them. The children's lives were cut short for no other reason than they were Jewish. The horrors they knew are unthinkable. Please light a candle and remember a child. If I'm going to light my candles now, if you would do the same, and shortly we will then have a minute's silence, and thereafter the rabbi will read the memorial prayer for us. So please join me in lighting your candles. Thank you, Phil. If you would place a timer, if you would go live, or rather unmute yourself, so that you can end it. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now have a minute's silence to remember the victims of the Holocaust.
Okay, that ends the minute silence.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Now I'd like to bring in Rabbi Lister to say the memorial prayer.
Thank you. El Mali Rachamim, Sheikhim Bamrimim, Hamsei Menuchanachina, Al Kanfi Ashina, B'Ma'alois Kadoshim Utoirim, Kazoy Harakia Mazirim, Et Nishmais, Rivavois Alpha Yisrael, Anoshim Vatov, Shenergu Vashenishchatu, Shenechnugu Vashenishafu, Vashenikberu Chayim Akidush Hashem, B'dei Hamaratzim Hagemanim, V'Yizrehem Mish'ar Ha'amim, Kulam Kadoshim V'Tayrim, U'Vahem Goynim V'Tzadikim, Azei Halvonayin V'Dira Tira, Ono Bal HaRachamim, יסתירים בסייסי כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרה בצורכם את נשמסם, אדוני הוא נחלסם, בגן עדן תהי מנוחסם, ינוחו בשלום ומשכבם, ונאמר אמן.
Thank you. I would now bring in David Oliver, who will introduce our guest for the evening. Thank you, Rabbi.
Good evening, everybody. Dorit Oliver-Wolff, BEM, from Yellow Star to Pop Star. Aged just 5 and living in Budapest at the start of the Second World War, Dorit learned very early of its horrors. Dorit and her mother suffered years of appalling hunger, cold, hostile conditions and constant fear, but managed to survive through many miraculous escapes until peace finally came. Dorit took great comfort in singing passionate about becoming a successful performer. Stateless and with no passport, her adventures continued after the war. No less remarkable than her war-torn life is the tale of how she became an international singing sensation. She has been very active in England and received the BEM, which is British Empire Medal, for services to Holocaust education and awareness. Dorit will be delighted to answer any questions. Please write in the chat room or click the raise hand on the bottom right hand corner of the participants area. If you wave your hands, we possibly and probably won't see you, so please try one of those two items. Dorit is going to introduce herself with a short film. So Dorit, over to you.
Good evening, everybody. And it is an honor to be invited to be able to share with you a little bit about my life. It is quite a change for me to be able to admit it that I'm Jewish, because I spent most of my life as a child trying to avoid that anybody would find out that we were Jewish, because that would have been admitting that here I'm ready to be killed. I didn't even know that I was Jewish when I was 5 years old, because we were not very religious. In Yugoslavia, in those days, religion was not such a, unless people were really, my grandfather, he was Dr. Sigmund Handler, he was a solicitor. But then my father and my mother, they were religious, but not like many people are now. And then when the war broke out, we fled to Budapest because my mother was Hungarian. And she was a teacher. Before the war, she was teaching in the Yugoslav court. She was a ballet teacher, an art teacher. So I was with her wherever she went, even then. So by the age that I was 4 years old, I was dancing in front of the King of Yugoslavia and King Peter then. So I was already a little bit stage struck, but I tell you about it later. And it is very a big relief to me that I can now, after many, many years, I can openly say that I am Jewish without thinking that somebody's going to spit at me, because now I'm big enough and old enough, I would spit back at them. But when I was 5 and 6, I couldn't spit, and I thought it was just quite horrible to get spat at any age, but not at that age. Anyway, about the liberation, which is, of course, that's what we are celebrating today, has been one of my most memorable and amazing days of my life, because it was the Russians who liberated us. But I will talk to you about it after, if I may. And I really think that the Liberation Day is the one that stayed with me forever. It was so memorable. That was after 9 months spending with my mother and some other people in a derelict cellar. We had no light, and we were hiding in a ruin because the air raid shelter was okay. So nobody came there because it was a total ruin. At night, the grown-ups, I was the only child down there. At night, the grown-ups would go out and pilfer for food because everything was bombed. And if they saw an open shop, they would just bring back whatever they could. And at 9 years, I weighed 3.5 stone. I had no hair. I had pneumonia. I had pleurisy. And one of the people in the cellar with us said to my mother, "I'm very sorry, but she has got only 6 months to live." And I just didn't really quite understand, because I wanted to become a famous singer one day. And I thought, in 6 months, I can't achieve that. 6 months is, but as I see, many 6 months has stopped since then. And singing saved me. And to have music and singing is a gift of God. And if everybody can have singing in them, there will be happier people, because singing is just so important to our souls. Anyway, I would like you now to see a small story about me, then we can go on and do a discussion. It was made by BBC Inside Out program. And with a bit of luck, David is going to click and boom, boom, it's going to happen. Yes.
Well, tomorrow is Holocaust Memorial Day, a time to remember the millions of Jews who died at the hands of the Nazi regime. But one pensioner from Eastbourne lived through it, and her story is dramatic. It even has a soundtrack to go with it. It's not every day a former pop star visits your school. Dorit Oliver-Wolff has come to St Paul's Catholic College in Burgess Hill to talk about her life. But her journey to get here is extraordinary.
And this was one of the songs that I sang in 1961. That was my first hit.
Her childhood was a world away from the students listening today. Hers is a remarkable tale of war, near death, glitz and glamour. Dorit was a young Jewish girl, just 5 years old, and living in Hungary when the Nazi regime started to spread across Europe.
You know about the Holocaust, and I wish I wouldn't.
Originally from Yugoslavia, Dorit and her family fled Belgrade when war broke out. But they were split up, and she and her mother found themselves in Hungary.
When you were running and hiding from the Germans, where was your father? Did you ever know?
My father was taken into a forced labor camp where they were hacking stones. I don't think my father even had a duster in his hand ever before. By the time he was 30, he was worked to death.
Dorit and her mother spent the entire war in Hungary, where anti-Semitism was rife.
One day we were walking to a park. Budapest is full of beautiful parks. And when a big fat blonde woman crossed the road, looking me straight, walking towards me like that, and I was a tiny little girlie, she spat in my eyes and called me Büdös Zsidó, which means stinking Jew. And I didn't understand how you assimilate stinking Jew. Why do I have to be stinking if you are Jewish?
There was mounting hatred towards the Jewish people. Millions were sent to concentration camps, so Dorit's mother decided they would hide the fact they were Jews.
My mother refused to wear, or let us wear, the yellow Star of David, because my mother suddenly reinvented herself and became a Red Cross nurse. But that was a very good disguise, if you like.
Constantly on the run and in fear of being found out, they moved from house to house. But a neighbour realised Dorit was Jewish, and one day while her mother was at work, she was caught and put into a sorting house for concentration camps. She spent over 2 months there on her own.
One lady there, I don't remember her name, at night, when I was crying because I missed my mum, she would take take me into her arms. And she comforted me. And one day, they took her as well, because the soldiers used to come in and you, and they went, and they never came back. She never came back.
With the help of a guard, Dorit escaped and was reunited with her mother. They fled to another city in Hungary, Pécs, not knowing that the Nazis had captured thousands of Jews there, and they were soon arrested. While her mother was questioned, Dorit confronted her captors.
I got up, went to the desk, pointed at the photo frame. "Are these your children?" And he said, "Yes, they are my 2 daughters. They must be the same age as you are." Oh. And then I said to him, "Are you going to hurt my mummy?" He said, "Scheiße." He went around, beckoned my mother out. He said, "Come here." And she says, "Not all of us Germans are nasty swines." And this is why I try to believe that there must be a little bit of good in people. And I like to believe that not every person who sent these people to the gas chamber enjoyed it.
Having narrowly escaped death twice, Dorit's ordeal wasn't over. As a homeless refugee who'd had little food, when the war ended, 9-year-old Dorit weighed less than 3 stone. But it was singing that kept her going.
When I was afraid and I was alone, hidden somewhere, I sang. And when I was hungry, I would invent and sing songs. And all I ever wanted to do is really become a singer one day.
Oh, yes.
After the war, Dorit went on to study at the University of Munich, where she sang in jazz clubs. She was discovered by the North German Broadcasting Company and was signed to a record label. Suddenly, Germany couldn't get enough of her.
On a nice blue autumn weekend.
Many of the young German Air Force had me as a pin-up in their lockers, and everywhere was my picture. And I thought, my hand, do they know that I'm Jewish? It was a funny feeling, you know, but it was the day I became their pin-up.
And as their pin-up, Dorit was invited to sing at a concert for the airmen and their families.
I peeked through the curtains. The women had the most elegant evening dresses on, but the gentlemen had the uniforms on. I thought I'm not going to be able, because suddenly it was not the audience anymore. There were the German soldiers there. And as a finale, I said, now I'm going to choose a very special song for me, which is Havana Gila, which is a Hebrew song. They all got up and sang the song and clapped their hands. And I just had this amazing feeling of triumph. And when I sang, and I remember putting my arms up and thinking, I made it. You didn't manage to kill me. You killed all my family, but you made me a star. That was, I think, one of the most remarkable and memorable shows that I ever had.
Dorit moved to England with her husband in 1962. She was convinced she would have the freedom to live the life she chose here, and also the freedom to tell her story.
It was just generally really interesting to hear about how someone can survive something like that.
She didn't have any anger about it. She more or less was more passionate about it and her experiences, and I thought she spoke really well.
Dorit's written her memoirs, and she hopes they can serve as a reminder of a chapter of history she thinks should never be forgotten.
I just feel that there are so many people that I would like to tell them, look, there am I went through this, and I have seen that, but there is life after it. Make the best of it that you can. It's not that I want to remember, believe me. I just cannot forget.
Now,
That's
if you want any
it,
more
David.
information about tonight's show, you can
Now
visit
you
our
click and tell her to go away because it's my turn now. Natalie, go away. She's gone. So I hope that you enjoy just a little bit of a snippet. And this is why in the memoirs that I have written, from Yellow Star to Pop Star, and then the consequences, because when the war ended, it just doesn't just end. Part of the war and the memories stay with you forever. And the last few years, I have dedicated my life. I don't know how long I have, especially with this coronavirus thing, but as long as I have, I feel I need to talk for all those people who can't talk for themselves anymore. And the stories must be told because it must not be forgotten. People forget. History repeats itself, sadly, more now than ever. They say never again. This doesn't exist, never again. We just have to become more resilient. It is happening. I don't know how I survived, but I did. You have to ask yourself sometimes, was I so good or was I so bad? People say only the good die young. Perhaps I was really bad because I'm 85 and I'm still kicking and I'm enjoying it. But I do find that I have got this need to go out and talk about it. And I speak to schools, and it is not, you don't only talk about the horrible times that you had. The people today, the youngsters, have to remember that we are all the same and that we all have to have a hope. And however bad your life is, it will change. And being Jewish, one of the things that I always used to say, people say, we are the chosen people. And my prayer is, please, could you choose somebody else for a change and kick them? Just leave us alone just for a few years. You know, I am very proud to be Jewish, but please leave me alone. Anyway, whoever is in charge of clicking, could you now put on my PowerPoint, please? Everybody's gone quiet. David? Ooh.
No, it's Phil, between Phil and David, I think, isn't it?
Is that Phil who is going to be the...
Yes, do you have it, Phil?
No, I'll say it's not working, I'm afraid.
Right, okay, so I will try.
But if it's not there, I can talk for England with an accent, of course.
We don't notice the accent.
Well, everybody's got an accent. Even people in Eastbourne speak.
That's why we don't notice it.
Oh yeah, we are being very kind. Very kind.
I have a difficulty with that. Let me try and share screen. Hold on a second.
Okay. When my kids were little, they went to school here, and one day my son came back. He was about 6, and he came back, and his tie was this here, and his hat was funny. He went to, and I said, darling, what's the matter with you? Did you have a fight? Yes, mommy. Why, darling? They said you have an accent. Is that dirty? I said, no, everybody's got an accent. I said, don't start to fight because you will spend a lifetime. Because I have an accent, but that's not bad. Well, he thought it was something terrible to have an accent. So here I am. If you can't find it, then I will just talk. If you can find it, it would be amazing.
Do you want to carry on, Dorit, for a few minutes? And
yes,
then
I will carry on.
And then he'll tell you.
Well, the war, when the war started, I was then in Belgrade, and suddenly Yugoslavia didn't make a pact with the Germans, so the Germans carpet bombed it. And I remember it was 4th of April 1941. Long time to remember. And we were bombed out. The whole house was burning. We didn't even know what was happening, and we were all running. It was like a stampede, you know, like a stampede of buffaloes, but it was the whole human race who lived in Belgrade was running. And all we had on is our nightie and the pajamas. And of course, it was not just the Jewish people, everybody was running. And eventually we got to the woods where the partisans were waiting for us, and they all gave us a blanket to put over us. And they put a hole in the top, so we wore it as a poncho. But I was so tiny that they had to cut it in 4. And I also got one of those things. And then most of the people after the bombing went back to Belgrade. But because my mom was Hungarian, she decided that we are going to go to Hungary. So we walked, she carried me on the back. There was my grandmother as well. And we walked, we hitchhiked, we whatever it is. On the way, people gave us food. But in anti-Semitism at those days, we didn't feel any of it because it was between Hungary and Yugoslavia. So it was always that part of the world. Sometimes it was the Austro-Hungarians. So it was the Austrians were there, then the Hungarians were there. So it was a big mishmash. So eventually we got into Budapest, and my mother rented a 1-bedroom flat, and she taught, and that was this. They spoke perfect Hungarian, so nobody, and there was no sign of anti-Semitism at that moment. But as I said, first time when we went for a walk, this woman spat at me, and it was absolutely out of the blue. Between the park and going home, the whole world changed, because they had these great big buses with caricatures of Jewish people with hunchbacks counting the money. And they said, these are the people who are stealing your money. And everywhere suddenly tannoys spit on the Jews, and the Jewish people who were walking towards home, suddenly they were not allowed to walk where the people walk. They had to go down with the cars, so they were not allowed to wear on a footpath. Yes, that's what you call it. And all the shops suddenly said dogs and Jews are not allowed in. But it happened within about an hour. So on the way back, and my mother was, of course, terrified. And I was really surprised, because my mom was a very feisty young lady, very Hungarian. And if somebody would have even looked at me unkindly, she would have been confrontational. And when this woman spat at me, I was surprised that she didn't kick her somewhere where the sun doesn't shine, or spit back at her. My mother wouldn't just let her. She was like a tiger mother. And I just looked at my mother and thought, are you going to spit back at her? She didn't. I thought I was coward, but she knew better. So she squeezed my hand and turned around, and I had never seen my mum walking so fast. And she was squeezing my hand so hard, I thought she's going to break it. And on the way, the first port of call was a jewelry shop. And she bought 3 little crosses, one big one. She wore a big one. She was very, very egoist. She bought herself a bigger cross, and Grandma and I had a smaller one. My grandmother was from, and to her to wear a cross, she was afraid it's going to burn into her flesh. It would be such a sin. So she always puts a cloth or something underneath it, so it shouldn't reach her skin. And also, you see, we didn't have any candles in those days, but every Shabbos, I mentioned this to David, and he said I should mention it to you. Every Shabbat evening, she took a box of matches, and she made 2 holes in it and put the matches in. And she had this black scarf over her head, and then she would do this thing on the candles, and she would bless me like Rachel, Rebecca, and Leah. That's all I remember. And sometimes she would burn her fingers, and she started some more candles. And that was our Shabbos evening. And we didn't have any food because we didn't have any coupons. So at night, in the evening, my grandma and I used to go around scavenging dustbins in front of hotels and schools and hospitals. And whatever we could, usually we would not pick up any meat, not because it wasn't kosher, but because it stunk. But we picked up peelings of potatoes and all the vegetable things. And then she would cook it to death, and we would have that. But of course, our main meals were, if we would have to queue up the whole night for bread. And then if we had a little bit of oil and a bit of crushed garlic, then we would dunk the bread into the oil and garlic. Perhaps that's why they called us stinking Jews, but there was nothing else to eat. So, I don't know. Everything must have had. I still like garlic and oil, by the way. And this is how we were hiding. And when we would see, because they spoke Hungarian, and if we saw somebody gathering there, we would disappear somewhere else. At that time, I didn't know that my mother was also working for the underground. Everybody in those days, any intellectual person, everybody was a communist, like Karl Marx, of course, and he was Jewish, by the way, but you know that. So I didn't know that, because how did I know? I was by that time 6. Do you know what your mom did when she was 6? Well, and of course, that's why she got addresses from all sorts of people, because Grandma would stay in that flat, that one-bedroom place, and my mom and I would disappear. So because if you are 3 people, that's a family. 1 person, nobody cares much. And she was an old lady, and she dressed in a scarf, and so my mother would get these little pieces of paper she would meet somebody, and then she would eat that paper up. And I thought to myself, can I have a bit of that paper to eat as well? I thought, my God, my mother is mean. She just eats her own paper. But of course, these were the addresses of other people. And so we would stay at night. We were not allowed to flush the toilet. And we would also have to stay in until the next night. But it was nicer than sleeping on the corner under a bus shelter. And this is how we escaped most of the war. One day, my mother thought, well, this is no good. So she rented another room. And as she invented herself as a nurse, she had this big Red Cross emblem there. And she had another colleague of hers, and he was also an underground Jewish gentleman, young. He dressed up as a doctor with a stethoscope. And they would go with a white Volkswagen van into the ghettos, and they had a Swiss flag from the Swiss consulate. And they would go in with some kind of a folded paper, and they would say, we are here to take 10 Jewish children. And she would, and that's how they would go out, put them into the Swiss consulate, and then they would do some more. She was quite a hero. And I was with her all the time. And then she worked, because she had the uniform on, she then had to go and work in a hospital, really. I mean, she knew how to put a plaster on. And in order to be safe, she would put a bandage around my face and sometimes cut her finger and suck a bit of blood out and put it around the plaster so it should look really genuine. And if anybody would stop us, she would say, please have a look at our papers first, because this child, she never told them that I was her daughter. She just said, I'm taking this child to the children's hospital because she had an accident. And then they waved us through, and it was shaking like this. And I learned how to keep my mouth shut. Now, of course, I couldn't do it anymore. And so this is how we used to walk the streets. And mostly we had to go places like the railway station, bus station, where people were mingling. And then in Hungary, you used to have the chestnuts, when you put them on grill, the hot chestnuts, and they would put sort of like a triangular piece of stanitzel. They used to call it stanitzel, which is ein kleines paper bag, and they would put sort of 5 or 6 hot chestnuts in. So first of all, we used to have it because it was hot, because it was so cold. And when it was cold, then we could eat it. So it was quite okay. We only had the clothes that we had on because we couldn't have suitcases, because that was suspicious. Only the immigrants and the people on the run would have suitcases. So we had few layers of clothes on it. And when the shoes that we had on had a hole, we had to put some newspaper in it because we didn't have money, or we couldn't have mended it. And newspaper is quite amazing because it has got an insulation. When the cold winter, we would put the insulation underneath our shirts or jumpers, newspaper. You change a bit of a color, but you became a little bit darker, but it was quite warm. Later on, I found that the Russians were smoking it like mahorka. So newspaper is many, many good. I'm not going to tell you all the rest of it that you can do with it, but to us, it was closing as well. I don't know before or after, but doesn't matter. So I was picked up. I was with this lady, with this landlady, when she saw me, the one with my mom when she worked as a nurse. She thought it was a good idea if I was safe with somebody else and not with my grandmother, because if grandma was being picked up, then we would go definitely to a concentration camp. But if I stayed with some Christian people, it would be sort of less. And the woman was up all this old bag. She thought, oh my God, you have got such a lovely daughter. Look at those big green eyes and the dark hair. And she gave me even a biscuit. Ooh, it was like Christmas and New Year all put together. But I had to spend a lot of time together, and I was not allowed to go out. And the first 2 days went very well. My mom went off she became, in the meantime, she got upgraded. She became an operating theater nurse. And my mom said that every time they opened somebody up, she wanted to puke and fall into the stomach, but she just had to hold people's intestines. And stories she used to tell me, they were quite horrible. But anyway, so one day, the door opened wide, and two ginormous, well, I was only little, two ginormous soldiers, all dressed in black boots, and had an SS sign here. And the lovely lady who used to admire me suddenly shrieked, "This is the stinking little Jew. Get rid of her. She is contaminating the air. Get rid of them. I don't want her." So they took me. I didn't know where. All I know is I enjoyed the ride because I have never driven in a limousine. So I said, wow, it must be nice where I'm going, because I sat in the back with this great big leather limousine, and to a child, everything is a fairy tale. But the fairy tale ended very quickly, because they took me into this great big building, and they marched me, and nobody talked to me. If I was too slow, they just pushed me like this. And they opened this big door in that house, in that room, and behind there was all adults, about 250 people, men and women. I was the only child. Nobody said a word to me. They pushed me in, and I stood there, and these people just looked at me. I feel, it's like in a zoo. Suddenly you are the monkey and everybody looks at you. And then they didn't understand what I was doing there. And then people have asked me about one thing and the other. What was my name? Where is my mother? Where is my father? I said, I don't have a mother and I don't have a father, because I was afraid. My father, by the way, was taken into in a work camp. How do you call it? And they took them, I think, to Siberia to hack stones. My father was 24 years old then, or 25. He and my mother's brother were all taken. My uncle was taken to Poland, and my father was taken to hack stones. He has never even had a duster in his hand. He was a proper spoiled little boy, but why not? At least he was spoiled while he was alive. By the time he was 29, he was killed. And we had a letter from the German government, well after the war, that my father, 29, died. He was worked and starved to death. So he died where he was working. But because I never saw him die, I never accepted the fact that he died. And I was looking for him, and nobody ever heard of him, anything at all. I always, inside, I hoped that he escaped somewhere in Russia and maybe married somebody else, and maybe, he was an architect and he was a jazz pianist. This is where I got my talents from, you see. And, but even now, there was nobody read a Kaddish for him or mourned for him, because nobody knew And it still hurts because I would have loved to know my father. My mother always kept on saying to me, oh my God, you are just like your father. Then I said, ooh, dead? No. That's how he would have been if you would, anyway. So this is why on a day like this, because I don't know where he died, when, I always light a candle on the 18th of August, because that's apparently when he was born. And his father and his 3 brothers, they were killed under horrible things. So everybody was killed. My mother survived, my grandmother survived, and her big wish was to die in the Arets, which she did. My uncle survived, and we emigrated then after the war to Israel. And that was the best time of my life, because I just didn't believe that everybody was Jewish, because after the war, I didn't dare to admit to anybody that I was Jewish. And when people look Jewish, I say, which part of me looks Jewish? So, all right, but you were just always afraid. If somebody asked you directly, later on you said, are you Jewish? I said, why? What are you? So you become very confrontational. And when we went back to Yugoslavia, when I was 9 years old, when the Russians liberated us, that was really quite awful. I mean, to see people like they looked in Belsen, this is how the people in the cellar looked like, and I couldn't walk. I was 3.5 stone, but they let us go back to Yugoslavia. And when we got back to Novi Sad, where I was born, because we hoped that we would meet the rest of the family, but of course everybody was killed, and I was the only survivor. And my mother got a villa where my grandfather lived, but it was empty because the neighbors so nicely. So my mother borrowed one of the partisans with a machine gun, and she had a machine gun. I told you she was a hard cookie. And she went with one of the partisan soldiers and herself from house to house and got slowly back all the furniture that belonged to my grandfather. And they said, oh, we were just looking for it for you. We knew it, you would come back, my foot. But whichever it is, and amongst those things, my grandfather had a big Steinway concert piano. She got that back. When I started going to school, the children spat at me and threw stones at me. And they called me again a skeleton Jew this time. And because I didn't have hair, my grandmother crocheted me a kind of between a kippele and the Indian thingy. She crocheted me one of those things and put things there so that looked like dreadlocks. I must have looked a real twerp. Anyway, but of course the children didn't think that was pretty. And as I said, they victimized me. So I decided not to go to school anymore. But I started to play on the piano that was with one finger, and I accompanied myself, and then 2 fingers, and it wasn't very good, but I thought it was marvelous. And my grandmother adored me, and she thought, my grandchild is a genius. Well, and one day the windows were open, and suddenly I heard some people clapping. And I looked out, and there were lots of people listening to my 3-finger hop, and of course my amazing dramatic singing. I was 9.5, can you imagine? And then one day the door was knocking somebody there, and there were 2 very official people looking there. And they said, who is playing the piano? And my grandmother said, my grandchild, why is she not in the school? We report that she is not in school. Oh. So they came in, and then I told them that I had been spat from the Hungarians and the Jews to be Jewish, and the Germans locked me up. I'm not going to have now the Serbian kids to spit me either. I'm not going to school. Can you force me? You have to go to school. I said, all right, then give me a week and put some weight on me and I go to school. I have really an argument with these 2 people. No, that's not what we are going to do. Play something. I was a show-off, of course, not need to tell you that. And then and there said, wait a week, you're going to have a state scholarship from a music academy because you are amazingly talented. And you should have seen my grandma. Oh, but anyway, I got a state scholarship to Montenegro to study the piano and singing and my hair suddenly grew a little bit, not much. And this is why I learned the ballet and singing and playing the piano. And in the meantime, luckily, the law came in that the Jews, it was again the first time that it was quite an advantage to be a Jew, because in a communist country, everybody tried to go out. It was all right for Karl Marx, but Stalin was not the same style of person, you know. So even my mother changed. I don't think she wanted to be a communist at the time anymore, because it was not, to be Jewish in a communist country, believe me, it's not good. Anyway, so we went to Israel, and I don't know whether you heard about the boat called the Radnik. That was one of the boats that the English, because Palestine and Israel, they didn't let us in. So for 6 days, we were not let into Israel, but we had about 1,800 people on that boat. It was so full, and amongst them, about 800 we were children. And we had no water, and we had dysentery, we had no food, but we didn't have enough petrol or whatever ships are being fed with, or coal, to go back. Through humanitarian rights, they let us into Israel. And as I said, it was sort of quite fantastic, because they said that everybody was Jewish. And I remember going with a bus, and I poked the bus driver on his shoulder. He said, "Excuse me, are you Jewish?" He said, "What do you mean I'm Jewish? What else do you want me to be?" Very polite, but I mean, this was a sabra perhaps, but maybe not. He could have been a top judge before, but now he was a bus driver. And it was something to get used to it, that everybody was Jewish, whether they were sweeping the roads or the top surgeon. And it was, I never wanted to leave Israel. I never wanted to leave Israel, absolutely loved it. But my mother had other ideas, and she wanted me to learn French. So she put me into a French convent school. Well, that was bloody terrible, because the singing was nice, but I just wanted to be Jewish. And then suddenly I had to listen to all the Catholic nice stories, mind you, these Jesus stories, and he was Jewish. They were quite funny, but I didn't want to know them. But I learned French and Arabic there as well, and English. So it was a bonus. And then we left for Turkey. What did you do? You just had a piece of paper there, David. Did you block yourself out? Did you not want to see me anymore? No, anyway, so then we were in Turkey.
No, something dropped out. Nothing personal, don't worry.
Well, I thought, I can't be that horrible that you want to block me out. First you invite me, and then you block me out.
Never in a million years.
Yeah. Anyway, so when I was 14, I went to school in Istanbul doing my A-levels. The police came and said, "Now you are 14, you are supposed to have your own passport." Well, I didn't have my passport. I was on my mother's passport and child. I was the end child. And my mother had to bribe them with one of her bracelets or whatever she had to wait until Monday. So she went to the German embassy to get a laissez-passer. And my mother married in the meantime. To my biggest surprise and disappointment, she married a German prisoner of war. But he came to Israel with us. But of course, I didn't speak to my mother anymore, because I thought she was a traitor. And she tried to explain to me that not the German man who saved us when we were in Hungary, it was a Nazi soldier who saved us. She said, not all Germans are horrible. And he turned out to be very nice, but it was quite good that she had a German husband then, because through him, instead of going to be put on the first border on Turkey, with a 14-year-old European child, and with 14 I was child, I was still a child in a way. Anyway, and so I went to Germany and to his parents. And it was really quite funny, because they didn't let me out in Germany, in Munich, because I didn't have a passport. They wanted to send me straight back to Istanbul. But in Istanbul, they wouldn't let me in because I didn't have a passport either. So I would have spent my lifetime on the aeroplane probably. Anyway, so my step-grandfather had to adopt me then and there at the Munich airport. He had to swear. So my stepfather became my stepbrother. My mother became my sister-in-law. Rabbi, what do you think of that? Can you explain that one? Anyway, so there I went to Germany. I was there sort of for about a year, and I didn't. My grandmother, she was lovely, but they were all octogenarians. But they were not as fit as I am, of course. And the first thing is they cut my hair off very short, and she bought me earrings. My mother would have killed me. She said, earrings? Only prostitutes wear earrings. Well, today everybody wears earrings even in their noses. But anyway, but I looked sort of far less. I had hair down to my waist, so she chopped it all in a bob. And earrings, and I learned German. But I wanted to go back to Istanbul to finish my A-levels, because that's what one does. But I couldn't get back because I didn't have a passport. You can only go back as on an artist visa. So you have to be or a sword swallower, fire swallower, a gymnast, a tiger trainer, or a dancer. Now, I learned how to dance all my life. So I was only 16. And there was an ad in the paper that they are looking for dancers for the Istanbul theater. So I auditioned for it and I got the job. My mother didn't know and my grandmother didn't know. I only wrote my mother a letter that I'm arriving in Istanbul as a dancer. So we arrived, and of course, there were about 12 girls, and they were between 16 and 18. And I don't know how well you know, let's say an 18-year-old German girl. Shut your ears, Rabbi, now. I mean, they are all, well built. I was 16. My back and my front were the same. I was very skinny, not developed. And, but the 18-year-old girls, the German girls, wow, little Valkyries, all of them, big, big girls. Anyway, we arrived into the theater from Augsburg with a train. It was the Orient Express, except not so express, but it was that one. And then we had rehearsals. We were standing all in leotards on the stage. And these 11 girls, all of them, as I said, twice my size in every proportion. They just looked at me and they said, "What the hell are you doing here?" I said, "I'm a trained dancer." Yes. "What are you doing with us here on stage?" I said, "Well, I was with you on the train together. You all came here to the ballet." I said, "Did you see what you signed?" "Yes, I signed as a ballet dancer." "You're stupid." "Why am I stupid?" "You signed up for belly dancer. You didn't read the little letters. Belly dancer. You don't have a belly and you don't have any tits. What are you going to do with belly dancing with?" Well, of course, I burst out in tears. You can imagine. There I was traveling all the way to the Middle East, and I thought that I'm going to be Swan Lake and all that thing. And they are telling me I don't have any boobs. Well, excuse me, Rabbi, but you know about those things, don't you? Okay, then. Anyway, so they looked at me, but I burst out in crying. You can imagine, I was only 16. And I know that I was not sort of the most feminine looking thing, but I had eyes and teeth, and I was quite, Anyway, so don't worry. So they took a bra, filled it out with cotton wool. I didn't need a bra, somebody's bra, filled it out with everything, put me on false eyelashes and dressed me up. I never had makeup in my life before. And suddenly said, look in the mirror, and I thought it was somebody else. I didn't recognize myself. So if you had the pictures, you would see it. I had a double life. During the day, I was a schoolgirl with a uniform and 2 plaits. And at night, I had fishnet tights and boobs filled out with cotton wool and doing my Turkish dancing business. And this is how I grew up until I finished high school. So I had a double life. And one day I went, nobody was in the theater. And it was empty. And I sneaked in, and there was this mic standing there in the middle of the theater, lovely theater. And I said, nobody's here. And, you know, I always sang. I mean, singing, it was a cocoon. I escaped the fear, the hunger, everything. Every time I was hungry or I was afraid and the bombs were falling, I just shut my eyes and I was in that little cocoon. And there, this was this microphone standing in the middle of a proper stage, theater. I sneaked there and nobody's there. And I tapped on the mic, 1, 2, 3. And I could hear my voice, boom, big. I said, so I started to sing and I sang one song. And I thought to myself, is this how you sound like? I never heard myself before, you know, like this in a bathroom. And yes. And, oh, it was wonderful. So I said, in for a penny, in for a pound. I didn't know those words, but it must have been that what I thought. So I had another song. But this time I sang even louder a little bit. Oh, it was amazing. Anyway, and then suddenly I heard somebody clapping. And I said, oh, this is it. Finish with the belly dancing. No more false bra. It's the end of it. I'm going to get kicked out because it's a taboo. You can't use people's stages. And then this man comes up the aisle. He says, don't stop. He says, who are you? I said, one of the dancers. Yes, I know that. But what is your name? So I told him, I'm Dorit. He says, did you know that you can sing so well? I said, I did, but nobody else. I had this little chutzpah already then. I said, I did, but nobody else did. But now you know. He says, how would you like to have a solo every night? Well, I don't know what to think. I recognized him that he was a director of the theater. It was his theater. Because when we came, he welcomed us. I said, but I only know 3 songs. He said, don't worry, you learn quickly. So every night, after the first part, when the curtains came down, I had a little number there. And I had a big name in the program. So suddenly, I was not known like a flat-chested ballet dancer. I was known suddenly, Dorit the voice. And that stuck with me later on. So then I became something that I always wanted, and I started to sing. And from there on, wherever we went, we had to tour. In the contract, I didn't know that we had to tour Turkey and Greece. And I toured in some very, very seedy places. And somehow there was somebody who loved me somewhere above, because they saved me from things which you can't even imagine. Because the nightclubs in the Middle East are everything that you ever read in a book, and even worse. I was so innocent. To the innocent, everything is innocent. And then when I finished I then wanted to go to university to study. And because I was so upset and I didn't want to speak German, and then I thought to myself, no, my mother taught me, learn about the people that you do not trust and you don't like, learn about them, because you will find out that everybody is the same. So I went to Germany, and it was the first thing everybody, I don't know why, maybe I do look Jewish. How do Jewish people look like? I thought I looked like, well, a bit better than some, but I didn't know that you could pick me out amongst 100 people. Anyway, every Jewish person that I met, it wasn't us. We don't hate the Jews. It was our grandfather, or it was my uncle. And it was, nobody did it. So I said, well, if nobody did it, how comes that all the Jews were killed? Nobody did it. Somebody must have done it. But it was very funny because I felt like a triumph to be in Germany. I didn't want to stay there. But every time, and then I started to sing because it was like a magnet. I had to sing. During the day, again, I went to university and I discovered jazz clubs. Oh, my God, they were fantastic jazz clubs. And I got paid for it because I didn't have any money. So I sang for my supper. And one day a producer came in, and it went from there. And then I was studying, believe it or not, English literature, politics, and international law. And I became a linguist because I speak 9 languages. And the only language I have a accent is in English. That is amazing. But I try. I remember when my daughter went to school and her second name was Andrea. And when people used to ring up, I would say, Andrea's mother, Andrea's mother. That like a parrot. I thought that sounded really proper English. But anyway, so this is where I am. Then I worked all over everywhere. And I met my husband. He was not my husband there in Germany. And he didn't know who I was because I wanted people to like me for who I was, me, not that I was a famous singer, because that was one thing, that was the public. But I wanted to be loved, warts and all. That's what you say in England, yes? And 6 months later, we were going out for 6 months. He was a nice Jewish boy from Hampstead Garden suburbs. And I think he was the first Jewish boy I met after in Israel. And one day we were walking down the street and somebody came in and said, oh, Miss Oliver, could I have an autograph? And Frank was with me. And he said, what is this stupid woman talking about? And of course, I opened my handbag and I gave her an autograph. He says, who are you? I said, the same woman who you want to marry. Then, yeah. But what is this rubbish with autograph cards? I said, well, I'm a singer. Well, I know you said to me you are a singer. I thought you sing in a choir somewhere. I said, yes, but it's sometimes with a choir, but I'm making records and I'm on television. That's you, he says. If I knew it, I would have run like hell. I would have not gone out with you. If I knew this about you, I would run like hell. Well, anyway, and then we came back to England, and then I had all sorts of things. And now you can ask me anything you like. Oh, yes. And I have written the book, my memoirs, which is From Yellow Star to Pop Star, because I thought that was a very appropriate title, because the Yellow Star during the war, and then the pop star. And I thought that was a nice continuation of the story. And this is telling much, much more than I could tell you now, because obviously I can speak for England now, as they say. But it is a book which is the truth, what you can remember. Many times I'm still there. Many times I'm still that little girl, 5, 6 years old, who is hiding from the bombs and waiting for my mother to come back for me. Because when she used to go to work, she would hide me. And I have to be in a cupboard sometimes for 4 or 5 hours, just waiting for her. And sometimes I wake up and I'm still that girl. And then I realize that girl is actually me. So that is the book that I think it tells you all how life really is, because just because the war ends and we have been liberating, within us, there must be quite a few Holocaust survivors who may be listening to this. Part of that is always with us. It's like a wound. We just must not pick up the scabs. Otherwise, it never stops bleeding. But it is still bleeding. It is still there, and it never goes away. I know that you want to say something, David. Anyway, so this is it. And I just don't know, because I used to be on Amazon, but now I don't think I'm on Amazon. But if anybody wants a book, this is a sales spiel now, you can then, David will give you my address. All you got to do is to send me the check, your address, I sign it and put kisses on the bottom and then sign it to you, unless you come and pick it up from Eastbourne. Yes?
And
I hope you enjoyed. Go on.
Sorry, can I just interrupt for a minute? While you're on that subject, we had a chat the other day, and I know we're not an advertising agency, but as Dorit's here, she asked me to ask everybody there, and you may have contacts, I don't know, but she's looking for a new publisher and a new literary agent. So if you know anybody, please let me know, and then I'll pass it on to Dorit. Now, having said that,
you forgot the toy boy business.
That's another department, so not my department.
Rabbi,
have we got? Sorry.
find me somebody nice. Sorry, go on, David.
Right, question time, I think.
Yes.
Any questions?
There aren't, no, but I have one for you, Dorit. So just wondering, going back, you talk about the war and the scabs and the feeling and living with it all your life. Growing up through the war, could you ever see an end to it?
To see an end to it then?
To an end to the war. Did you think it's going to happen next week, next year, in 3 years?
As a child, when they say ignorance is bliss, it is literally a bliss because you don't really understand. You don't understand where it started. You are in it and you don't understand the end of it. You just have to live from day to day and just accept it, what's happening. The grown-ups were afraid. The grown-ups have hope. The grown-ups had some idea. But what can you teach a child who is, well, I was 5 when it started, then it was 6, 7, 8. Between 6 and 9, how does a child have any kind of a concept of the beginning, middle, and the end? You don't. You are just there. You just accept it. And you're afraid.
Yeah, I'm sure. And obviously you went at some point during the war from Belgrade to Budapest, which is, what, about 250 miles or something. How did you get there? And what was it like? And how long did it take you?
Well,
why
again,
did you choose that? Or why did your mother choose that?
Well, my mother didn't want to go back to Belgrade because it was bombed and because she was born in Budapest and her mother, she was also Hungarian. She only came to Belgrade probably to marry my father. And then she got stuck there because she was working in the Yugoslav courts. And then people dispersed after that when the bombing started. We were about 3 or 4 weeks in the woods before we could go, because people started to go back to Belgrade. But she decided that we are going to go to Budapest because she was born there and she thought we would have a much better job to sort of get to find a work or something. And we walked. She carried me on her back, and we sometimes stayed in the place, and that was on the border because Novi Sad is on the Hungarian border. So there were lots of Hungarian people, and they just shared the food with us. And we just walked. I don't know how long it took us. And sometimes there were some people who had a cart, horse and cart, the peasants. They would give us we could ride with them. But I have no idea. I was only 5. I have no idea how long it took us. But I remember that my mom used to carry me on her back, and she was only little.
There are a couple of questions. Could I ask the person who has his ID as 1+3T if you would like to change your name so I know who you are before we can bring you in to ask a question? Otherwise, I'll go to Bradley Howard and unmute you. If you'd like to unmute yourself. Are you there, Bradley?
Dorit, thank you very much. And it's an inspirational story. I've actually got 2 questions that we were thinking of. The first is your smooth talking. Would you consider a position on the Edgware United Board of Management?
If you're thinking chairman, I'm happy to step aside.
I would think chairwoman as well, definitely.
That was a slightly rhetorical question. No, a serious question. What messages have you got for young people today based on your amazing experience during the wartime?
This is why I'm going to schools and talking to the kids, to young people, that they should realize that in this world, there is not them and us. It is only us. And as long as people think about, or it's them, nothing to do with us, we are never going to become friendly, because it hurts you more if it's your own family. But on the other side, there are other families as well. And instead of sort of hating each other, learn about some other people, because kids are not born with fear. No child is born with hate. You know, you don't know what hate is. Hate is slowly taught to them through the parents or to the siblings, and then it is a peer pressure and so on. Learn about each other, because the differences are usually not so different. Like the Muslim children and the Jewish children, they have got so much similarities. And once they learn about it, then they will understand that really it is a myth. You don't need to hate each other. But if you keep together, the world will be much, much better. And I am trying to explain to kids that understanding and compassion, and just treat other people the way you would like to be treated, because hypocrisy is terrible. And people are hypocrites. Nobody is better and nobody is worse than you are. When you cut your wrist or your skin, the same color blood will come out of it, whether you are green, black, yellow, striped, Jewish or Muslim or Hindu, the same color blood. So you have to understand that humanity should all hold together, because if we don't hold it together, who else will? This is one of my messages, that everybody has got an equal right to life and living.
But don't you think one of the most important things is education? And I think the Jewish people as a people, the first thing they want to do is to educate their kids at a big cost. And I think that's why, I know it might sound very racist, but I mean, I think we educate our children, and that is the most important thing. And when you go to other certain people, they don't, and they're taught hatred at a young age, and that is what's happening now. I mean, I'm shocked when you see these kids that have been taught to hate the Jews, and I've always worried about this, because what's the reason? Why do we hate the Jews? But why do people hate the Jews? I mean, there aren't that many of us anyway. Why pick on us? And I know you're working with Rahima, aren't you? Rahima Mahmoud, who we were talking to a few weeks ago, because I know you're involved with the Chinese Uyghurs, and it's all sort of, they suddenly want to hate people, but we always seem to be in a firing line somehow.
People hate others because obviously sometimes it is fear and it's jealousy, because people are always wanting something what they don't have or what the other people have. And the thing that it is about the Jewish people, that they always get up again and fight for, and even if they have got the biggest cross on them, so to survive deep inside, they are Jewish people. But the Jewish people can hate as well. And this is the thing, everybody hates everything else. I mean, one of the things, because I don't want to upset anybody, which I don't understand, I traveled a lot. Jewish people don't like the other Jewish people. Like the liberals fight the Orthodox fights this one. A Jew is a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. End of story. The Hitler didn't choose, I killed that Jew. No, that is a nice Jew. I live in. There was no nice Jew. Everybody was just a Jew. And to me, everybody is still a Jew. And if we fight each other, how can we expect the goyims or the outsiders to like each other if we don't like each other? I'm sorry, that upsets me so much that I could scream. I hope that I didn't step on anybody's big toe. But if the Jewish people will all unite, can you imagine how strong people would be? In America, they have got even more sects than we have got here. But we are all the same. Your turn.
Interesting you should say that. That very piece is something I've been saying for years. It actually is in an article I put in our Shul magazine only this month about divisiveness amongst the Jews. And as you were saying, so, we have more in common with other parts of our religion. In fact, we have more in common with the rest of the world. The problem is people concentrate on the differences rather than what we have in common.
Exactly.
And that is what causes the problems.
It is, but I mean, but but the Jews don't kill each other, do we? We're you know, the Jews are probably, I would guess, probably the most argumentative race in the world.
No.
There is more ways to kill somebody than to cut the throat. They are killing their reputation. And they look, I was in Israel and we had some, I loved it, as I say. And then I lived in Jerusalem, and there were some people from another Jewish sect, and they would burn everybody who was driving on Shabbos the car. They would stone them. Well, excuse me, that was one Jew against the other Jew. Now, if I'm rich enough and I can afford it to have a car, I will drive it. It's nobody's business. If that happened in Germany, they would say, oh, this is anti-Semitism. That happened in Jerusalem. One Jew against the other Jew because he was driving a car. Your turn.
David, we have questions coming in.
Oh, go on then. Okay.
There's also a message from Anthony Goldfine, who says, Dorit is an amazing lady. We have thoroughly enjoyed seeing and listening to her. We love you, Dorit. God bless you.
Oh, thank you. I kiss him as well. There is somebody amongst you who is a friend of mine. She just rang me today. Rosemary, is she there?
Yes.
She said
I can see
there.
Rosemary there, and also Robin Ruth from Eastbourne has said hello as well, Dorit.
Who?
Robin,
From Eastbourne?
And I've got a question from somebody called Adrian, if you would like to. Adrian, if you would unmute yourself.
Hello, Dorit. I thoroughly enjoyed your very inspiring talk. And I've always felt in situations that out of bad comes good. And in the past, when there's been disasters, Israel has always been at the forefront of going to help other countries, be it earthquakes or starvation and hunger. But nevertheless, Israel still gets a bad PR. But I just feel at the moment with the COVID pandemic that we're in the middle of, which has been a terrible, terrible situation for the whole world, somehow Israel's come up, trumps, and the whole world seems to have admiration for the way that Israel's handled the situation.
Yeah, and this is why it gets me my hair to stand up like this. They are slugging down Israel, and yet they are accepting all the medication and all the medical instruments and everything. And if the Palestinians need something, the Israelis are going to help them. So this is such a lot of rubbish. I would like to just go there and shake their hands. I would like to meet one of them, and my God, I'm 85, but my God, would I show them a fisticuff. I boil, I'm angry. I'm really angry about that. And if only the Palestinians and the Israelis would have enough brains to get together, and they could make out of Sahara, they could make a pardes out of it. They could grow oranges and lemons, and they could live all together. But it is the outsiders, it's not their interest. They enjoy, they want them to fight.
Well,
I live there. I could speak Arabic. I could swear some, but I'm not going to make poor Rabbi blush. But I mean, they are so similar. I mean, they could live together. They wouldn't know one from the other. But it is not the interest of other people outside, and that's horrible. Next.
Well,
I'll bring Flora in now.
Hopefully now things are getting a tiny little bit together with UAE. In fact, we've got the UAE chief rabbi coming in a couple of weeks, which should be very, very interesting. He's around Dubai and the various other countries, and it's a start.
I'd like to go. Yeah, I could like to be an ambassador and go.
Well, you can do now. I mean, apparently there's so many Israelis going into Dubai now. It's amazing.
I have been in Gaza, and I have been in Cairo and in Alexandria. Okay. I've been all of those places. But I prefer Jerusalem.
Yeah. Actually, I was going to ask you a question, slightly another different direction. The Germans, obviously we know about the Germans during the war, but how are the Hungarians?
The Hungarians are the biggest anti-Semites in the whole wide world. They sucked it in with the mother's milk, and they are still anti-Semites. And it is really because it is just absolutely ridiculous, because the best musicians, the painters, the composers, the doctors, most of them, many of them are Hungarian Jews. But for some reason, and I don't know why, and even the Hungarians don't understand it, during the war, the Hungarians killed more Jews than the Germans did. And that is just unbelievable.
Is that true?
Well, in my eyes, but even the Hungarians will admit it to you.
The Hungarians hate everybody. In fact, wherever refugees have come over the last few years, they don't let anybody in. They're happy with their 10 million population, and they stick by that, and they don't change.
I have to paraphrase it. They're not happy. They come out and moan about it, and I speak quite good Hungarian, and then I said, if you don't like it here, go back to Hungary. They moan, the Hungarians moan. They're talented people. The cooking is bloody marvelous. I love Hungarian food. I still cook it. But unfortunately, it is something there you can't expect. And yet they are lovely people, they're smart people, but there's just something there. They can't be happy because happy people don't hate everybody.
But this is a different generation now, isn't it? You know, do you think it's the same thing in Germany?
Is there any Hungarian Jewish people around amongst you?
No.
No one's waiting. No. But there's how many Jews are there in there's quite a few, isn't there, in Hungary now?
Where? In Hungary?
Yeah.
Oh, but they are. It is quite. I have got a couple of people there, and even now, very difficult on Shabbos when they were the kippur, go on the street. People are still being abused, and they still sometimes have got police outside the synagogue. So that's not funny.
No.
David, we'll bring in Flora, who has a question.
Yeah, try to unmute Flora, but I don't know. Try and unmute Flora.
I can't unmute. Okay.
Oh, yeah, we can hear
Hi.
you. There you are.
Hi, Dorit. We all think you're amazing. I tell you, I had to laugh about your accounts about the nightclub and whatever else. I mean, you really got away with murder, and especially talking to our rabbi like that. You mustn't do that. Good on you. Thank you. I think my question to you is this. I think it must have been your sense of humor and your feistiness and your zest for life that's put you through, it's taken you through all the horrors that you have experienced. That's one question. I wonder if, I'm sure you'll agree, it's really a rhetorical question. But the other question, I was very touched by the fact that we have to believe in everybody, whatever race, creed, religion they are. And you gave touching stories about a German soldier who said we're not all beasts, and when you showed in the picture, asked about the picture of his daughters. And you mentioned somebody else as well, your mother saying that not all Germans were bad. Can you yourself give me any other incident where you could show any touch of humanity, whether it's with a Jew or a non-Jew? Because we need something uplifting tonight. I'm in Israel. I'm actually in Jerusalem, and I've been watching a lot of the, we're here in the thick of it, hearing the testimonies of all the survivors, and there are very few of them now. And I want you, please, to give me, Dorit. You've really entertained us, and I mean that word advisedly, but I would like you to give me something about, yourself, that with some touch of humanity that you can remember.
When you say entertain us, you don't want me to give you a belly dancing show now quickly, do you?
I don't mind, but not really, no.
Now you see, I wouldn't need the bra filled with cotton wool anymore. You see, you sort of grow out of it. The rabbi has left the room, so I can say jokes. His wife seems to have a good sense of humor.
His wife's still here, though.
He's wonderful, our rabbi. He's a good one.
You meet all sorts of people everywhere. Things just happen, and you yourself have to put yourself in a position. How would I like to be in that other person's position? But something which is quite funny, and when I go around in schools, and usually teachers would sort of ask me, because if they've got bullying or if got racism, or they would always tell me, could you just touch on that subject? And there was lots of Muslim kids in the school, and there are about half a dozen Jewish boys there. No, I hope nobody's going to get shocked about that. And in the break time, usually it is an extra teacher has to be there because they do get quite violent with each other. And I sort of think on my feet, you know, it is not that I write a script or something. And I was there and they were sitting there. On one side was the 2 Jewish boys and the other one was about half a dozen Muslim boys. But sitting and I was talking about the Holocaust and about the same thing and how similar they are. And I said, well, they were all about 14-year-old kids, so they were sort of puberty grown-up. They knew how the birds and the bees. And I said, you see, you speak about differences. And I'm going to now give you an example of similarities. And I always ask the teachers, is it okay if I say things that, no, you have got carte blanche, say whatever you want. I said, okay. Take a 14-year-old or 13-year-old Jewish boy, put him in a room and take all his clothes off, including the knickers. Put next to him a Muslim boy, same age, strip him as well. And the girls go, when I said take off the knickers, all the girls and everybody knickered. You know, they just all started. I said, let them look each other. And if anybody can tell me that there is a difference, I give them a $5. But they couldn't tell any difference because it was all the same. So I said, I'm not suggesting that from now all the Jewish boys, Muslim boys should be walking around in the playground naked or without the knickers. But the fact is, they are all the same when they are naked. And then they put the clothes on. The rabbi came back just in time. So then when they put the clothes on, then they are enough hate each other that they kill each other. I said, this is what I'm getting. We are all the same. And the clothes that we are wearing on top, it is just a question of taste. But just because of that little bit of difference, nobody has got the right to hate each other. But the Jews and the Muslims haven't got even that petit difference, which is all that difference. So why are they killing each other? Well, I had standing ovation. And now every time, but this is the whole thing about it, that there is no difference. And yet there is so much hate. And this is when people can get over that hate, then our children's children will have a little bit of a better. For me, it's too late already. I'm more over there than I'm here. I'm still fighting for it. But I'm still convinced that one day people are going to wake up and say, look, we are going to die anyway. Today it's COVID, tomorrow, whatever it is. So that little time that we got down here, I don't know where we are going. You see, I am, unfortunately, religion, I don't go for it because I am interested in all religion. If my dad would have been alive, then I could have had perhaps a proper Jewish upbringing. But having to hide to be Jewish all my life, I know more about catechism than I know about being Jewish, but I'm very Jewish. I'm born with it and all my family was Jewish. But I just believe that a religion is a different way to talk to God. If there is a God, then all the different religions talk to him in a different way. But we all pray for the same thing. For a happy life, for healthy children, for this and that. So no matter whichever religion you pray, you are praying with a different, but you still pray for the same thing. If you see what I mean. And one day perhaps we will all speak the same language, and perhaps we all want the same things. In my lifetime, probably not. But if you have got my book, then you will remember me and say, that was that little Jewish lady there, and she told us all. Sorry, but this is just sharing my thoughts with you. Next.
Yeah, well, no. Are there any other questions out there?
No, there aren't. No.
Okay. But I think, I mean, we're 50% over what we should be. It's 9:30.
How many people are there, by the way?
Well, we had 90 people there.
Nearly 100
well, no, we had 90.
Plus on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
How many?
About 100.
Holy moly!
Yeah, and wait a minute, you've got to double that because most people,
apart
from me and one or two others, you've got to double that because most people, there are couples. So we probably had nearer 200 people, which is quite amazing.
Actually, it's probably it's probably 400, David, because everybody on here, they're all Jewish. They've all got different opinions. So bring those all into account as well.
Yeah, that's what they said in Israel when I was. If there are three people standing on this corner of the street, they have got three different parties. They all have a different party there.
It's actually not the truth, is it? I mean,
if I, in my lifetime, if I could achieve somehow, if I could help towards it, maybe the rabbi can help me how to do it. If all the Jewish people, all the Jewish, whether they are Orthodox or I don't know how many different, I'm very Jewish, but I don't know all those things. If we could all just be Jewish, how could that be achieved? Could always be just Jewish. Can you imagine how many Jews we really would be? Well, my goodness. You're all stop talking. Did I shock you? Did I shock you?
I think it's a wonderful thought to believe that we can all be peaceful and everything will be rosy within the Jewish religion and everybody.
But it would be. It would be.
Not to put too much jest on it, but unfortunately, I think Spurs will win the league in the same year. But even that won't happen.
But that would be my wish. That would be my big wish.
It would be wonderful, but is it achievable? That's the problem. People's
Don't
views.
We all want the same thing? Don't we all want the same thing?
Hopefully,
but we want to achieve it in different ways, and that's the problem. We all want goodness in our lives, but there's a way of achieving that, and because our views are different in how we achieve that, that is why we can't come together.
But we all have to pay a price for it. We just have to be willing to pay that little price for the bigger idea. What do we have to give up? We can only gain.
Yes.
Is Robin waving to? Can you do?
Sorry, who's Robin?
I don't know. His name's Robin.
Robin who?
Can you demute yourself, Robin? You know how to demute yourself?
I don't see a Robin.
I'm not
Robin's
sure who
in my
Robin is. There are a few
right-hand corner.
thank yous, Dorit, that have come in from various people thanking you for the evening.
Hello, Robin.
Do you know Robin?
Look, if I can click, you can click, because I don't know what I'm doing.
Oh, okay. No.
But talk. You don't have to get him to talk.
Is there a Robin?
Yes, I can see him now, but Robin, you've got to mute yourself.
He has to be asked to unmute himself because I can't see him.
I can.
If he puts his virtual hand
up, he's waving. Can you put your virtual hand up in the?
Robin, I have clicked on mute. If you want to try and click unmute yourself.
No. Okay.
No.
Go. Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. No.
Oh, I can see you as well now.
I'm glad to hear you. Ruth,
yes.
Watching you.
And go on.
No, I'm just saying when we get together sometime in Eastbourne.
Are you in Eastbourne?
Yeah, you know Ruth and Rob. You know we sang with you.
Yeah, yes. Yes.
No, I just say we'd like to get together with you. We went out to Waltlin. You know the Jewish lad from Judy Menuhin School who played the violin.
Yeah, oh yes, he was very talented.
We'd like you to meet up with him and get to know.
He went to the Yehudi Menuhin College, didn't he?
At the school.
Yes.
And he backed us in the music, and so if we can get together at some point in Eastbourne, maybe share with.
You know, Stephen Rosenberg.
Yeah, Stephen sent.
Well, anyway, he can arrange it.
Yeah. Well, Stephen sent me the
link.
This online thing you're doing.
I didn't know there are that many Jewish people in Eastbourne. I thought I was the only one.
We're not Jewish, but we stand with you.
Ah, but there you are. You don't have to be Jewish.
No, I know, but we stand with you in the music. And Ruth loves singing. You've encouraged us.
Oh, yeah. I
And
was
love
singing
you
on that Holocaust Memorial Day. You remember?
Yes, I
Yeah,
love
they were.
your CD you gave us.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
thank you.
gave
Thank
us
you.
the CD, and I listened in the car, and I think, well, how do you?
Ah, well, thank you so much. Very nice to talk to you.
This story I haven't heard, a lot we haven't heard, but
thank you.
Thank you for sharing and hearing what you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Robin. Thank you for coming up from Eastbourne.
Yeah, we're involved with the Christian Friends of Israel group and various others in Eastbourne. So
we need a lot more like
we
you.
stand with you.
Yes.
Thank you for your support.
Can we all come down to Eastbourne?
Yeah, come down to Eastbourne.
But at least only when it's warm. Let us know
when it's warm.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have someone called Jerry who wants to ask a question.
Oh, yes, Jerry. I must talk to him.
If he'd like to unmute himself.
Another southerner. Where is he?
I don't know. Who's there? Jerry?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Oh, Jerry, darling. Kissy. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you? It's lovely to see you.
You see, I inherited David Oliver through you.
Yeah.
You are the...
Yeah. It's your fault, Jerry.
and my dear Dorit, I'm in the process of making you a little bit religious, as you know. So.
But yes, you promised me that I'm going to come to the.
Yes, you're going to come to my services, and you're going to come to Friday
I have
night.
never had a Seder evening in my life. Can you imagine that?
Well,
I've never had a Seder evening, and I was going to come to you, and then the COVID came.
Absolutely, but please God, next year you'll be with us, and you may be singing Manish Tana for us.
Ah, Manish Maham, Laila Zeh. Yeah.
Just want to tell, because I know that the time's very limited now, but I wanted to tell the audience this evening that came to Eastbourne. It was just incredible. The hall, this wonderful large hall, was filled to capacity. In fact, the Eastbourne and Sussex organisers may have to take a larger venue, which would be the Congress. But at the end of the evening, Dorit got everybody to join with her in singing Hava Nagila, and to see the Lord Lieutenant and all these people there was wonderful. But if there's time, David Oliver and David Lander, I would just like to take Dorit a few pages back, and I want to know what happened after you were taken to the Music Academy. What happened? How long were you there?
Well, I was there for about almost a year or so.
Oh, not long.
Which part of it do you want me to tell you?
Well, what happened? You were only there for a year. That's a shame.
Yes, because the thing, we were only there for a year because in the meantime, the law came in that the Jews could leave to go to Israel.
Yeah.
And we just had to sort of toss it up. What is more worse, me staying there, continuing this? But I mean, once there was the question of Israel, I would have walked, I would have swum. So
that's the answer. Thank you, darling.
Yes, and that was absolutely, because we only went with what we had on. We had no, we didn't have any money or just a suitcase. So we didn't have any goods. And we arrived in Israel and in Haifa. And we were put into this great big camp, which was full of tents. Yeah. And I just didn't, there were thousands of people, and they were black people, yellow people, and I just couldn't understand. I never knew that there are Jewish people who were black or other color. And of course, then my mother explained to me that they're all every different. So it was so amazing. Everybody was Jewish, and I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And maybe when I kick the bucket, perhaps I get buried in Israel somewhere.
Well, as much as we both love Israel, I'm glad to have you down here in Sussex.
Oh, I like it here as well. That's lovely. I like your posh kipperle.
Oh,
that's very once in fashion, always in fashion.
How can you see that?
because I have X-ray eyes.
Amazing.
Nobody else can.
Okay.
And
Dorit,
Jenny and
you
I
would
know
like-
each other over 30 years.
Over 40 years.
And we discovered each other after many years again.
Dorit, you would
Yeah.
like Edgware very much as well. Our beaches aren't quite the same as you have in Eastbourne, but it's still very nice.
We've got more kosher butchers here, though, haven't we?
Yes, we have halal butchers here. Yes.
You can't have
And when
halal.
I go in there, I said, "Do you mind? I'm Jewish." But it's the same way. Halal is halal, kosher. The same thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
We won't bring the rabbi in on this point.
I think
that would take a while.
You see, if we had a rabbi like this in Eastbourne, like you, I would go to shul. But the ones we had years ago, he was so miserable that I just thought, yeah. But we don't have one now, do we? Anybody? Any Jewish person from Eastbourne? No. Send us a nice one, and then I come.
Okay. We'll find one.
Okay.
Find me one nice. I like to learn. I need to know more.
Our rabbi is very happy all the time. See, you can see him smiling now.
That's good. Try to help me to make, if you can help me, can you imagine how I would like, because I spoke the other day to this United Reform somebody, and they were from 10 different religions. And I think it was somewhere in, it's with W, it's outside London, not Watford, something like this. It was one of them, such interesting talks. And they were all different religions there, and all, this is my dream, because this is uniting everybody. Yes, next one.
Right. Well, I think it's I don't know. Is there a time difference between us and you? Because it's 9:45 up here, and most of us are up. So I think we should really try and come to an end.
Well, that's fine. It's wonderful. I really enjoyed talking with you and meeting you. And when the weather is lovely, you can invite me and I'll come and have tea with you. But I rather have coffee. I don't drink tea only when I'm ill. And it would be lovely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to try and experiment when it all closes down. If any of you are left, and we're going to demute everybody, and if you just want to stay and have a chat about anything you want to have a chat about, but whether it works, I'll probably be the only one left, but we'll see what happens. In the last few weeks, Dorit, we've spoken quite a lot, and I've met many Holocaust survivors over the years, but I don't think I've met anybody so positive, really, all through your life. You're involved in so many things. I mentioned before the Chinese Uyghurs, and we interviewed Rahim and Mahmoud a few weeks ago. I think you're meeting her tomorrow, aren't you? So
I'm one of the ambassadors now, because I just believe in human rights. And I had quite an interesting interview with a he was very nice chappy, and LSD or LSC or some station. And before, or was it after the interview, he said to me, and I must say that I am really very touched by the fact that you as a Jewish woman are defending the Muslim people in the Uyghur people. And I said, religion doesn't come into it because they are human. And that doesn't come into it. The religion, I never even thought about them. And it wouldn't have made any difference. But if more people would have stood up for the Jewish people, then few more of us would be still alive. And if people are being so mistreated, and it is so parallel very much with the Jewish people, because they are, and we are now in the 20th century, and everybody said never again, and it's happening again. And just for commerce, how much are people's lives worth? How many pounds do you put on each person's head? So this is, I feel that it is just so wrong. And this is where it comes to it, us. It is all us. We are human, hopefully.
Well, I'm speechless, really. I can't tell you the admiration I've got for you. So, I mean, all I can really say to you is thank you very, very much for coming. If you want to stay on and be undeleted, I don't even know what the word is now.
Unmuted.
Deleted, yeah. Are we deleted? No, we're not deleted. Demuted.
You're muted.
Muted, yeah, okay. So
thank you very much. Can I just say thank
Yeah.
you so much for inviting me? And it is always so nice because you meet people and you see people's different viewpoints, and it just shows that we are all a big family. And that's what it's all about.
Thank you very much for that. And I think at this point, we'll hand you over to David to say goodbye, au revoir, shalom.
Yes, thank you, Dorit. A very, very interesting evening. What a fascinating life you've had. I can't say I envy the early part of your life, but you've obviously you've gone from the depths of despair to coming out to have a wonderful life, and thank God for that. And I can only wish you good health always, and you continue with your smile and your happiness and your passing on of such interesting stories and educating people throughout the rest of your life. May you always be well.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Could I just say for everybody, next next Wednesday is Yom HaZikaron, moving into Yom HaAtzmaut. We will be live on Wednesday, though it won't be Wednesday night live, though we will be live at night on Wednesday. What we're doing is we're trying something slightly different. We will have music, we will have entertainment, and so that we will have more information. We're still pulling everything together, but it will be in the short news sheet as of Friday, and so there's more information, but please do join us next week. As I say, it's Yom HaAtzmaut, as something to celebrate, and obviously the Yom HaZikaron is is the opposite, but we move into the good times of the birth of a nation that we have